Alright guys, so these next few videos are going to be all about the essential gear you'll need to have in your home recording studio, and this video we're starting with microphones. We're going to spend a long time here in this video because there's a lot to cover, and your microphone is going to be an extremely important part of your home studio, so I want you to have all of the information you need to make an informed choice when you go to buy your microphone. There are a lot of factors to consider when buying a microphone. Obviously price will be a major factor, and these days there's really a large range of quality microphones to choose from for under $1,000, though of course you can also pay a lot more than that, and I'll walk you through some of the recommendations that I have later on. There are also a lot of different types of microphones out there that have various pros and cons depending on what you're looking to use them for, and we'll go over the major different types of microphones later on in this video too. Then there are a bunch of other things to consider here, like are you planning on recording in stereo, meaning you need 2 microphones, or mono, meaning you only need 1 microphone. I record with 1 microphone, so I record in mono, and that's how I think most of you will want to record as well. Really, unless you plan on doing 2 things at once while recording, like playing a guitar or piano while singing, or if you wanted to record 2 or more different people at once, mono should be fine for you. Even if you wanted to record 2 different things or 2 different people, you can just record each of those people or things separately with 1 microphone in a process called overdubbing. All you do is just record multiple separate takes. That's how I always record when I'm collaborating with other artists. They'll basically send me their track first, and then I just record my part in a separate track while listening to their part, and we'll cover more on that in a different video later on in this section. Another thing to consider is whether or not the microphone requires something called phantom power. This will also influence what audio interface you choose, because if your microphone requires phantom power, then you want to make sure that your audio interface can provide that. Phantom power is just a type of power that some microphones need to function, and you'll sometimes just see it displayed as 48V on audio interfaces and in digital audio workstations. Condenser microphones generally require phantom power, while ribbon mics actually might be damaged by it, so it's just important to know about both your microphone and your audio interface. Durability is also something that I want to point out, because some microphones, like dynamic microphones, are a lot more durable than others. We're really only talking about using microphones in a studio setting here, and I'm assuming that you won't be super hard on your gear at home. If you were choosing a mic for live performance, then I'd have different recommendations for you, but in this video we're just focusing on mics in a studio setting. Another big thing to know about your microphone is what kind of polar pattern it has, because some microphones only have 1 polar pattern, whereas others come with a lot of different polar pattern options. And we'll get into polar patterns in more detail in just a minute. So there are 3 main types of microphones that I would recommend to you for studio use, depending on your needs, and those are condenser microphones, dynamic microphones, and ribbon microphones. What type of microphone you choose is going to depend on your own personal preferences and needs, but if I had to recommend just one of these types to you that would probably be a great fit for most of you in most situations, I'd recommend getting a large diaphragm condenser microphone. For most cases, I just don't think you can really go wrong with a large diaphragm condenser microphone, like this one here, for example. So I actually went ahead and picked up this Rode NT1 large diaphragm condenser microphone just so I could have something to test out for you guys in a budget-friendly price range. And I have to say that at $270 for the microphone, the pop filter, and the shock mount, this is a really solid buy, and I can definitely recommend it to you guys who are looking for something in this sort of price range. The audio that you're hearing right now is coming straight through the Rode NT1, and I'll continue just talking through it for the rest of our discussion on condenser mics here. Condenser microphones are the most popular choice for vocals, along with a lot of other instruments, and you really have a lot of nice choices in the $200 to $1,000 range. Obviously, you can spend a lot more or less than that. This one that I'm using is in the lower end of that price range, so if you have a little bit more of a budget, you might notice an increase in quality. I know some people who swear by the Rode NTK, and you can get a new one of those for around $500. I've also used the Rode K2 in the past, and that's a great sounding microphone that costs a little bit more, around $700. I think once you get to around that level of price and beyond, there's really an incremental increase in quality, speaking from experience with owning a $2,000 microphone. So I think you can certainly get a really great professional sound from a microphone that costs under $1,000. There are a lot of other great brands out there besides Rode too, like Sennheiser, Shure, AKG, and plenty of others. I've been recording the audio for this entire course with a Sennheiser MKH H416 microphone because it's specifically geared towards capturing dialogue, and I've also tried out some other Sennheiser microphones in the past that have sounded really great. All the brands that I just mentioned have a large selection of microphones at a lot of different price points, ranging from a couple $100s up to around $1,000, so I'd recommend checking out some of those that fit within your budget. I've had a lot of personal experience with Rode and Sennheiser, so I can definitely feel comfortable recommending their products to you guys. I also wanted to mention that while I'm recommending large diaphragm condenser mics to you guys, there are actually two different types of condenser microphones out there. One is large diaphragm and the other is small diaphragm. Small diaphragm mics tend to have an incredible frequency response and are able to capture your recording to be as real sounding as possible, whereas large diaphragm condenser mics tend to color the sound a little bit more, meaning the mic almost makes your voice or instrument sound a little bit better straight from the microphone, almost like you've already put some light production effects on it. It really just depends on what type of sound you're going for, but again, for most cases, I think that a large diaphragm condenser microphone like this is going to give you some great results. So now let's talk about dynamic microphones, just so you have the comparison and because this might end up being the right fit for some of you. So now I'm talking to you guys through a Shure SM58 dynamic microphone, and this costs under $100. Dynamic microphones are more popular for instruments like drums or electric guitar and bass when you're recording with the actual amp with a microphone rather than using a line-in signal, like plugging it directly into your audio interface. Dynamic mics are less sensitive in terms of frequencies and sound pressure, so they're great for louder instruments just like the ones I mentioned, or if maybe you have a more aggressive vocal style where you're yelling or shouting, but they're not as good as condenser mics or ribbon mics for capturing more nuanced instruments or vocals. Dynamic microphones are also really durable, which makes them a very popular choice for live performance. You'll probably find this exact kind of Shure microphone or something very similar in just about every live venue out there. You have to be pretty close to the mic in order to get a good sound, as you can see here, but that also means that it won't pick up a lot of the external noise going around in the room, so you'll see a lot of live stream musicians using something just like this for talking to their audience. For example, my friend Laura uses something like this for talking to her audience since she doesn't want to pick up the noise of her fingers hitting the keys of her piano or just clicking her mouse or any of that kind of noise. You'd hear all of that extra noise that you probably wouldn't want to hear a lot clearer if you were using something like the vocal mic that I've been using the whole time for all of my course videos here. That one is great for pure vocals and you don't have to be close mic'd for it to sound good, but then because of that, it does capture a ton of external noise, so probably not a great choice for every application. And then ribbon mics are the other type of microphone that I'd recommend, although not a ton of people use them compared to condenser mics. This guy here is my main microphone. It's the AEA R44CE, and I purchased this for a whopping $2,500 about 7 years ago. I bought this microphone right before recording my first album, and I wanted to invest in something really nice because I had saved up money from my day job before I quit, and I knew I was recording myself at home and wasn't going to be spending any of that money on booking time in a commercial recording studio. I still wasn't totally happy with the microphone that I had been using at the time, and since I was financially able to upgrade, I decided to go for it. I did a ton of research on this microphone before I bought it, and thankfully it ended up being a really good investment for me. I've recorded all 10 of my albums and over 30 singles on this microphone, as well as countless hours of other types of recording projects for other people, so I've definitely gotten my money's worth out of it at this point. Remember though, this was not the first microphone that I started recording with. I first started with a $25 USB microphone, then I bought a really cheap condenser microphone that I can't even remember the name of it now, and then I bought my Rode K2, which was my first professional microphone, and that one was nice, but I decided to upgrade to this one. I love this mic on my violin, but most people probably wouldn't notice the difference between this and maybe something like a $700 Rode NTR unless they were listening to them back to back. I can't say it was worth 3 times as much as something like that. For most people it might not be, but with how much use I've gotten out of my microphone, I don't have any regrets, and I can say that it's been worth it for me. It all comes down to your budget and what you're comfortable spending though, but just know that you don't have to have something this expensive in order to achieve professional results. So back to our general discussion on ribbon mics. Even though I love my microphone, I wouldn't recommend it for most people unless you really specifically like the sound that a ribbon microphone microphone has. Ribbon mics are extremely sensitive, which has pros and cons. For something like my violin, I think it really works well at capturing those higher frequencies with a lot of detail, while also retaining a relatively warm sound. Violins can sound a little shrill in the higher register especially, and since I'm often playing up there for my recordings, I think that the ribbon mic I have helps warm that up. The sensitivity could also be a con though, since the ribbon element inside of the microphone is pretty fragile, and you can actually damage them if you accidentally use something like phantom power. Alright, now that we've gone through the 3 types of microphones I'd recommend, I'm back to talking to you guys through my Sennheiser microphone, and now I want to go through some of the different polar patterns available on these mics. In case you're unfamiliar with that term, a polar pattern describes a microphone's directionality. It's kind of confusing to try and explain, so I'll link you guys to some pictures that will hopefully give you guys a better understanding of what I'm referring to. Every microphone has a polar pattern, and some of the more common ones are cardioid, figure 8, omnidirectional, supercardioid, and hypercardioid. The most popular polar pattern, and the one that I would recommend you guys use for home recording, is the cardioid pattern, which essentially picks up sound from the front of the microphone, but rejects sound from the back of the microphone. So let me show you what I mean on my Rode NT1. For most of us who don't have acoustically treated rooms, this is a great pattern because we only want our mic to pick up our instrument or vocal from the front, not the room noise from the back. If you try to talk through the back of the microphone or the sides, like I'm doing right now, it's not going to sound nearly as focused because the polar pattern is trying to reject what's not directly in front of it, which is my vocal right now. This is important to keep in mind when you're experimenting with mic placement, but we'll cover that in another upcoming video. The cardioid pattern should be available on almost every condenser and dynamic microphone, but generally won't be on a ribbon microphone, which is again one of the reasons why, even though I own a ribbon mic, I'd still recommend getting some sort of condenser microphone for most of you guys. Most ribbon mics have a figure 8 pattern, also called bidirectional, which means it actually picks up the sound from the front and the back of the microphone just the same. I still don't want that room noise, so that's why I isolate the back of my mic with a mic shield like this, so that I'm really only picking up my performance from the front of the mic and not all of the room noise and reflections that you'd be hearing from the polar pattern picking up everything from the back of the microphone as well. If you choose a large diaphragm condenser microphone, yours might come with only one polar pattern option, or it might come with some additional polar patterns besides the cardioid pattern. I remember my Rode K2 had multiple polar patterns to choose from. I'd recommend using the cardioid pattern for recording, but you can also just play around with whatever other patterns your mic might have just to get an idea of how those things sound. USB mics are kind of another category of microphone nowadays, but I didn't mention it above as a recommendation because I just really don't think they're nice enough to use at a professional level in your home studio. You could definitely use a USB mic for a mobile recording setup where maybe you're on the road and you're just trying to capture some sort of demo type recordings. USB mics won't require a preamp or analog to digital converters, which are two of the things that your audio interface will take care of. So that's why they make for a great mobile recording setup. You can just plug them straight into your computer and start recording without any extra gear. But because of that, the quality isn't going to be nearly as good as if you were using another one of these types of microphones with a nice audio interface. So again, I just advise against using a USB mic for your home studio. The first mic I ever owned was a $25 USB mic I bought from Best Buy when I first started experimenting with home recording. I also used it in some of my earliest YouTube videos, and the results weren't great. Definitely not something that I ever used on recordings that I released for purchase, but it still sounded better than the internal microphone I had on my video camera at the time. So that about wraps up our discussion on microphones. Just remember, whatever microphone you choose, there are a ton of factors that are going to influence the sound of your recordings. There's no such thing as a microphone that just sounds amazing right out of the box in every single situation. Just like with a lot of things, you can get great results with less expensive gear if you know how to use it correctly, and you can also get terrible results with the most expensive gear if you're using it wrong. You really just have to take some quality time to experiment with where you're recording in your room, your microphone placement, and then of course plugins and effects in the production process in order to really dial in a professional sound. And don't worry, because as we'll be going through all of those different things in the upcoming videos. If you've done your research and you're torn between a couple of different microphones, a lot of retailers also have pretty good return policies, but just make sure that you know these policies before you buy. And as far as where to buy all of your different home recording studio gear, I've personally bought a ton of stuff over the years from online sites like Musician's Friend, Sweetwater, B&H, and Amazon. There are plenty of other sites out there that sell this kind of stuff too, but I can definitely just recommend the ones that I just mentioned because I've used them a lot. So there you go, guys. I hope this helps you narrow down your choice for the right microphone. I put together a little audio demonstration of each of these microphones in the next video so you can more easily compare them back to back. So I'll see you guys in that next video.